When we're hit with conditions like ME/CFS or Lyme disease or whatever it might be, our first instinct, understandably, is to turn to the professionals, to the doctors, the specialists, the people with the degrees. But for many of us, it quickly becomes clear that we have to roll up our sleeves and become our own advocates and our own health experts. And this might sound scary, but when you think about it, who knows your body better than you? Sometimes trusting our instincts and listening to our bodies might just be the medicine that we've been looking for all along. Welcome. I'm Raelan Agle, and here we dive into the stories of people who have overcome chronic illness and found true healing, whether their journey was a sprint or a marathon, simple or a total roller coaster. I'm here to uncover the exact strategies that worked and didn't work so that you can hopefully find the hope and the tools that you need to heal too. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to Matthew Hurtado, joining us from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Matthew's life took a dramatic turn when he was left bedridden with 3 chronic illnesses and PTSD, a combination that not only devastated his health, but also left him bankrupt. With his world completely upside down, his dreams of ever training like a pro athlete again seemed like a distant memory. But instead of giving up, Matthew decided to dig deep into his faith and inner strength to rebuild his health and his life. It is truly an inspiring and insightful story. I'm really excited to share it with you. So let's dive in. Matthew, so amazing to have you here today. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Raelan, for having me.
So I always like to let guests, figure out or tell me, the point in their journey that they'd like to start with. So take us back on your journey. How did this all start for you?
Well, I'd say the scene was 2008. I had just gotten married and my son was here. And I was in the fitness industry and I loved it so much. And I was going to make a career change. I was going to go into selling insurance. And I took this leap and I started to have these really bad anxiety and panic attacks. And I started to feel just not like myself for a while. And ultimately, what happened was I ended up getting, what do you call that? The lung pneumonia. I had that for a couple of months. And I thought, well, geez, this is bad. Like I'm not recovering. And when it was all said and done, I never recovered from that at that time. And it ended up being months and months later. Here I am sitting at home. I'm wondering what I'm going to do now. I started so tired. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate, and just so much going on that I didn't know what to do. That's kind of where I began this journey, and I'm sure many people can relate to that.
Yeah. And what did you think? Because you would have been a pretty otherwise young, healthy, I imagine, active, energetic guy. How did you cope with that? What did you think was going on?
Well, when you're completely new to everything like I was, I never experienced anything like that. You trust the doctors and you trust the medical establishment first, usually. And then if they run out of answers, which is kind of what happened with me, they threw the antibiotics at me and they, threw me through some psych tests. And they said, well, you definitely have anxiety. We get that here, take these drugs. And ultimately, my energy never came back. And so then I went to the natural path route, which ultimately the next logical choice for me. And then I ended up going to the healers and to the energy workers and to the supplements. And the story goes, it's eventually answers come, but I ended up bankrupting my family and really got into a bad situation from that.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate from that place of confusion and desperation. Most of us burn through whatever money we have, just trying everything we can get our hands on. And most of the money that I spent, that the people I interviewed spent, 98% of it was not what contributed to their recovery in the end. But, when you don't know what else to do, you don't know what else to do.
Right. And even I have to kind of be careful when I think about those times, because oftentimes I've never really done an interview like this about it, but sometimes when people bring it up, I'll get very emotional, get very sad because I remember what it's like. Even just I'm like it'll come out if I go there, it'll come out. But it's thinking of how am I going to raise my son? And it's hard, but it's so terrifying for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did things evolve from there?
Well, on a positive note, I started to look into mind body ideas and strategies, and that became very fruitful for me. It was, kind of years down the road, but I did discover the lightning process. I took that course. I also did reverse therapy and Mickle therapy, and you name it. I probably did it over the course of those years, and it ultimately took me 6 years to fully recover because along the way, I did find out from a Lyme literate doctor, and he said, "By the way, the reason why you're because I was down to 150 pounds, and like right now, I'm close to 200. It's like my natural frame. So I'd lost about 50 pounds, and I couldn't
Mm.
walk around the block, and I couldn't do any cognitive things. I couldn't even hold a cup." And he said, "By the way, you have Lyme disease." And he said, "That's what's wrong with you." And that was such a conundrum. But it took me 6 years to unravel the entire mystery and get completely well again.
So once he had figured out that you had the Lyme disease, did you go down that Lyme disease treatment route? What did that look like? And did it help?
So that began, yeah, it did to some degree. And there were some really good players along the way that really helped me piece things together. And I'll share that with you. The first thing was we started with uh, supplements and nutraceuticals, and I started taking a lot of really good things. The most impactful would have been minerals because I realized that most of the soil's deficient. We don't get a lot of that stuff. So it was kind of helping me to some degree, but that wasn't really moving the needle too far. Ultimately, there was a guy that came along, Gary Blyer from Advanced Cell Training, and he did this weird thing where he would be brain training. And I didn't understand any of it, but I started to get better and better by doing it. And that got me over the hump. And so that got me off the couch, if you will, at least to the point where I took a part-time job and I started moving forward in my life. And then the real kicker came. Well, I did I did the ozone, I did the Rife therapy. I if you've seen it, I probably did it along the way. Like that 6 year journey was a long period.
So you said you initially did some brain training work, and as we know, that can encompass so many different things. So specifically,
Yeah.
what did that look like for you? What sorts of brain retraining helped in the beginning?
What I really found benefit from early on was Mickle therapy and reverse therapy. They're kind of hand in hand. They were two separate people, David Mickle and John Eaton, I think, John Deaton, but or I can't remember the name. But they both kind of did similar things. I studied both of them, and there were these three keys to wellness that they talk about, and it was about putting yourself first, having boundaries with loving disallowance, and then being assertive in the moment versus emotional suppression. And I realized I was a disaster in all three of those areas. I didn't put myself first. I was letting people walk all over me. Um, I did not speak my truth in the moment. I suppressed everything, kind of bit my lip. So I was not good at any of those. So I started working with those. And then I realized that a real big component of the fatigue for me had to do with emotional, just really, really bad emotional stuff. And
Hmm.
that led me into it's not brain retraining, but the lightning process is similar to brain retraining, except it's more physiological. And when I added that into the process, I started to really gain traction at very, very fast, which kind of is ironic because accordingly, they thought I had this Lyme disease. But the Lyme disease also, I guess you'd say, went into remission based on doing a lot of this other work. I started to gain my weight back. I started to get strong. I was working out again. In fact, I went on to even train like a pro athlete a couple of years later and even stronger than I was before, which was the most beautiful thing about it.
Wow. Yeah, that's why I wanted to know about the Lyme disease treatment and how effective it was, because I was also diagnosed with Lyme disease at one point in my journey,
Mm.
which was a massive relief. I was actually very excited because it was sounded like something concrete and fixable, and there were books about it. And I did all the antibiotics, heavy doses for long periods of time. But it didn't seem to help. It wasn't for me the answer. For some people it is, but that didn't treating the bacterial infection specifically didn't seem to be what was going to get my symptoms to go away. For me, it was a whole list of other things. So it sounds like that was the case absolutely for you as well.
Yeah. And then I found something, and I want to share this. This is really something I wanted to give to your audience, is I found German new medicine. Have you ever heard of German new medicine?
I have not.
Okay. Well, that opened the Pandora's box for me on a whole new level. And what it is it's really mind body at a very precision um, rate, I guess you'd say, because what I found, especially with fatigue, is that according to German New Medicine, you have to have 5 concurrent biological conflicts happening at one time in the same situation to create the situation where the body kind of wants to lay down like the lost sheep, like it got lost from its, its pack and it just lays down. It has to kind of wait there. And now I'm not a practitioner, but I studied it long enough to get relief and to get benefit from it. So every time I'd have a fatigue crash, I would go back to these 5 keys, and every single time I noticed that all 5 of these keys were there when my body was, doing the fatigue at a very, very high level. I don't know if you can see that, but those are the 5 keys that are all happening at the same time. And so I would just ask anybody to at least look at it. I'm not saying it's true for you or not, but if you look at that direction, displacement, powerlessness, issues over money, liquids, survival like that, and then ultimately a self-devaluation because we're going through stuff. We don't really have confidence anymore. We lost our self-esteem. I noticed I had every single one of those. And it was also concurrently at the same time that I was diagnosed with Lyme too. I had all those 5 conflicts. And according to, I think it was Dr. Reich, I can't pronounce the German name, so I won't butcher it right now, but he did such a fine discovery in this mind body approach that when I looked at these keys and I realized that I just had to downplay one of them, because if they all 5 didn't concurrently happen at the same time, the body wouldn't order up that extreme fatigue. So I took one of those keys and I would downplay it. And sure enough, every time I was successfully able to do it, the fatigue would lighten up and it'd be gone. It was like, wow, it's not there today. I'm not fatiguing. I have my cognitive ability. I'm fresh. So that for me was a real tremendous breakthrough.
That's incredible. I love that you shared that. And it definitely tracks with what a lot of the people that I'm interviewing are saying, not specifically, in those words, but the themes of what people are talking about. And it's another theme that I hear, which what you just said, is also like you don't have to fix everything. It's not that you have to create this utopia of perfection in your life to feel okay, but addressing some of these things can be enough, or shining a light on some of them, chipping away at them, having awareness of what's going on, because it can start to feel like, I remember my own recovery, every time I'd feel stressed or things going on, I'm like, I can't, I'll never get better, but we're resilient and we can take on a lot. So it's good to know that you don't have to fix all 5 of those to feel okay.
Yeah. And you've had some great people on your show. I don't remember all their names, but I remember a guy named Dan, and he talked about danger, like that signal of danger, giving your body messages of safety, and all those things play into it. And I start remembering that, because the one thing I discovered is, everybody wants this panacea, one stop fix all solution, which I don't blame you. But in the moment, things can be different. So, for example, the fatigue I have, next week or whatever might not be the same as what I had, 10 years ago. And the same solution doesn't always work every single time. That's kind of what I discovered. And you have to be real intuitive with yourself.
Yeah, Dan Buglio, he's great. He's got a lot of great information. I can link his interview. It was an excellent one. He's full of insights. I'm wondering too, because you mentioned the lightning process, and there's a lot of mystery and controversy around it. So can you give us a high-level understanding of what exactly is the lightning process, and what about it helped you on your journey?
Oh, I love that you asked that, because it's such a great story. So there was a lady named Barrett who taught it in the States, and I discovered it, early on. And I was, I really didn't know what to expect, but I heard these amazing stories. This one guy said he was in a wheelchair and he walked 16 miles on day 2. And I'm like, what? I said, I don't care if it works or not. I'm going to go take it. So I got there, and those signals of danger, like as Dan would say, they were hitting me so hard. I was so bad, had the worst fatigue ever. I started to have my anxiety, the old PTSD was coming up. But they challenge you to literally use your physiology and to start, the word is doing. They say you're doing the fatigue, right? So they said you need to go do being well again, and they've trained you, get you ready for it. And then she challenged me. She said, "What would you do if you're well?" I'd say, "Well, I'd go to the gym." And I haven't done that in a long time. And so she said, "Go do that." I walked from the hotel where we were staying for the training, and I got to the gym, but I was so scared when I got in the gym and my symptoms were so heavy. I literally did the walk of shame back. I didn't do it. And at the end of the weekend, I thought I had failed because I did not make my breakthrough over that weekend. I heard all these great stories. I did not make my breakthrough. And I just like, I don't know what to do. But she stuck with me and she kept challenging me to keep doing it. And I kid you not, 2 weeks later, I kept doing it. And there was this one moment where something changed. And they explain it as in, if you imagine you're holding like a rubber duck underwater, it wants to come up, but they call it the PER, the physical emergency response, is holding down this thing. And once you release that, it just pops right back up. I had that experience where I did this, what do you call it? The lightning process. And something just changed in me. It just lifted. And I remember I had my dumbbell set that I would be working on. I went and grabbed them. And I used to be able to do 5 lunges with these dumbbells. That was my max. And I was always afraid of going over it because you don't want to do it too much because then you'd be down for 2 or 3 days. And I did 20 of them and I had no side effects, none of those crashes afterward. And I thought, this is crazy. It actually worked. And that's when I had my big moment and I realized, and to be honest with you, I don't really understand how it completely works. I just know that what I experienced.
Wow. Was your head exploding in that moment? Like, how do you even process such rapid change in your
So great,
condition?
so grateful, just so grateful. Literally, it's like, wait a minute, it's like waking up from a bad dream. But see, here's the thing, that physical emergency response, right? That signal of danger, it can come back again. And here's what I noticed. When it comes back again, you start getting tired and you do not want to do it. You don't want to, you don't, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's not going to work for me. You get really kind of in a different, I guess you'd say a different vibration where you feel like it's not going to work. You get doubtful. So I'd make myself do it every time, just like she would challenge me to do it. And it would come right back. My energy would come right back and you'd be a completely different person.
That is absolutely incredible. So I know you mentioned before we did this interview that there are some things that you feel are different, from your own discovery or your journey and your route with this than other, approaches to mind-body therapies. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, the main thing that I wanted to share that's really different, and we can stem off from there, is really getting back to these 5 keys and looking at it from this perspective in terms of if all of a sudden this heavy fatigue comes over me, because I've had it come back and again throughout the years. And when it does come back, I've always been able to line up and say, well, is this going on in my life in some situation right now? And it's always been pretty darn accurate. So what I do is I look at it and I say, well, which one of those can I downplay right now? And is it going to be direction? Have I gone in the wrong direction? Is the career path I'm on truly for me? Do I feel like I'm powerless? Is something I can't change? Do I feel displaced? Have I lost my place somewhere? Am I having stress over money? And ultimately, do I feel bad, poor about my performance, myself in general? And historically, up till this day, every single time I can say yes to all 5 of those things. And then I look at the situation itself and I say, this is the thing that's really triggering me right now. And then I go after that and try to shape my perspective differently so that it doesn't hit me the same. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does. I know you've talked about too how, your faith, your trust in God, all of this has been a big role in your journey as well. So how did that play in for you?
Well, the one thing that I'd say saved my life the most is when I went through that bankruptcy in 2009, it was finalized. I had this mentor, his name was Randy, and he had a couple other mentors, and he told me, he said, listen, I tithe, I sow into God's work, I believe in it. Here are some spiritual principles you can follow. And he started teaching me about spiritual principles in the Bible. And then I grabbed this book, The Richest Man in Babylon. I read it, and it was about, you tithe 10%, 10% you save, 10% you invest in a business, these money principles. And I started to do that, but most heavily, I started trusting God the most in terms of taking care of me. And I've been that way ever since. And I've seen God lift me up out of that stress and that worry and that concern constantly over financial needs. And that gave me the ability to have that part of my life not dominate my thoughts and my worries and my fears, so much so that I was able to really literally live from my joy. And when you start to be able to live from your joy, another thing I discovered was asking and answering the question, what is the fastest path to my joy in this moment? It does so much for aligning you with your true destiny that what happened next after the bankruptcy was nothing short of a miracle, because I took this job at a $7 and some change hour smoothie bar. And I thought, well, this isn't really going to do much for me because I have to take care of my family and my son, and I'm going to drive an hour to get there. You can add the math. And by the time this is said and done, I'd be out of money. But I was following my joy, and I had this mentor, and he kept telling me, he said, if you keep doing this, he said, you'll see what happens. Just watch. And I trusted him. So I kept doing it. And that joy led me to taking over that nutrition store. And I ended up, for one paycheck, 300 and some dollars out of pocket, the owner of a $250,000 plus franchise store signed everything over to me. Now, that was a blessing and a curse, because the curse was that he was losing all this money. So he wanted to get out of those debts. So he gave it to me. But the blessing was I had an opportunity. Now, what happened next was a real calamity of sorts, where the street that was coming in, where all the customers had to come to our store, was shut down for construction. So here it is. I'm a new store owner. I had just gotten over all this fatigue, and I'm starting to feel optimistic and hopeful. I have a new a lease on life. I'm going somewhere. And, and I go from 40 some customers a day down to 3. Now, you can imagine that's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. I'm really struggling now. This is a real test of my faith. One thing I did is I kept tithing to God. I believe in that. That's my belief. It doesn't have to be yours, but it's, I'm not trying to impress that on people, but it's what I did. And then I followed my joy. And I said, well, okay, what is my joy? I said, well, I'm going to go lock the front door and go in the back room and play my guitar. So I'd go in the back room and I'd play my guitar. I'd follow my joy. And then my accountant comes in and he looks and he says, well, your shelves are all drying up. Are you going to reorder? I said, well, I can't really afford to, because I'm getting 3 customers a day. I'm making just enough, honestly, to get to the end of the month. Maybe not even that. And he says, well, by the looks of it, he goes, I'd say you're done. You're going to go out of business here. And then the franchisor contacts me and he says, well, listen, I want you to go borrow money from friends and family, and I want you to advertise, and I want you to try to pump this thing. And I thought, oh man, this feels so wrong. So I did none of that. I followed my mentor's advice and I followed my joy in every moment, played my guitar in the back room, locked the front door. This seems completely illogical on a human sense. But what happened was I was playing my guitar in the back and I had this idea. It popped in my head and I knew what to do. So I went out to the store, grabbed my camera, and I made one of the first, selfie videos of me selling the products on camera. I put up a landing page, and by the grace of God, I was number 1 on YouTube that night. YouTube put me right to the top. The next morning, I had sales coming in, and they never stopped from that point until I sold that business on our number 1 selling product stack. And that was a huge profit margin. It was a 6-figure instant income. And it was a miracle. And you could say, well, how did you do it? And I'd say, well, I followed my joy in every moment. And it's my belief, speaking of faith, that joy is the strength of the Lord. And so when we follow that joy and honor it, we're reflecting that strength, and it comes to alignment where the ideas come to us that we need. Our supply comes from fresh daily ideas every day.
Oh my goodness, that is incredible. I've been on the edge of my seat during this story. Like, where is this going to go? What is going to happen? That is absolutely incredible. And I can see how that faith is so powerful, because that is a terrifying thing for most of us to do. Most people would give up and shut down. And but that's really, really amazing. I know there are some other things as well on your journey that have been very helpful. So tell us about some of the other, key components and insights and strategies that helped you to get where you are today.
Well, the one thing is in my journey, I've had to really grow spiritually. I think it's my life path, my life destiny. And one of the things you kind of alluded to is that it doesn't matter how far we go. We never have all the answers. and we're always going to be tested with something new. And when something new comes along, our first instinct is to rely on our human reasoning, and B, probably get fearful and doubtful and afraid. And those two things I discovered are the worst things you can do. And we know that. But what do we do instead of that? Well, the one thing that I went on to do is I did training of the FL Ross and wrote some books, and you can get those free on my website. And I wrote some books too, and I went studied Christian Science, studied Mary Baker Eddy. I studied these people who did these miraculous healings throughout the years, the centuries ago, usually like late 1800s, early 1900s. They were kind of pioneering the movement. And I said, what did they know that I don't know? Because I keep getting tested and I need more wisdom. And then I started to realize that there's this big idea that they kind of made a switch in their thinking to is what if God really is all in all, and what we're looking at is truly kind of an illusion, like it's like a simulation. It's something that it's real to us in the five senses, but it's not really real to us in our spiritual nature. And then how can we demonstrate our spiritual nature right now, right here? So Jesus would have said, this is the heaven that's at hand. And can we demonstrate that? And I think that if we have the right faith and we have the right knowledge and we apply it, I think everybody has the capacity to demonstrate it. And it wasn't something that was lost, 2000 years ago. And that's my belief.
So this has all shifted your trajectory of your life, your passion, your career. So tell us about the work that you're doing now that seems to be directly as a result of all that you've been through.
Well,
And how did you get here?
I'm kind of in the creative mode now. So after that supplement company, I went on and I built a couple other companies, and we ended up doing millions of dollars in sales in the health supplement industry. And it was a really fun, exciting time. It was a very, very wonderful time in my life, and it was something that I just wish everybody if I could take that experience and give it to anybody who's suffering right now, like I was in those early days, I would pray for that for you. And right now, I just want you to know that you literally can live in these amazing experiences, and that it's definitely not over for you. You just need the right information. That's my belief, because I had these amazing experiences, but then I also had more challenges. And so fast forward, when COVID came around, see, the story wasn't over yet. When COVID came around, I ended up catching whatever was going around. I had it for a couple months again. And after that, I started to have some really, really awful stuff that kind of made Lyme, whatever that was, look like a walk in the park. I had body parts going numb for days, months, inability to use certain things, and twitching everywhere, and literally tremendously scary stuff. And that's when I really started taking the spiritual ideas seriously, praying without ceasing and learning how to stay persistent in that. And I went through, at the same time, I went through a lot, including a divorce at that time, which was, we knew it was coming, but it's never easy for anybody, and it will rock your world when you go through something like that. And on top of all that, all of my mentors passed away. I'd always reached out to these, older than me mentors, because I grew up with my grandma and grandpa. So everybody who was advising me was always typically a grandma and grandpa age. And they all passed away in that same 2-year period. So I had all this tremendous loss, and it really just rocked the foundation of my entire world. But then, I met somebody wonderful. Someone came into my life, Cherie, and she came along, and she had been diagnosed with lupus and all these other issues. We went on a spiritual healing journey together, and she got rid of all of her medication. She doesn't have lupus anymore. She's get a couple flare-ups here and there. She manages them. She got well. She got a lot of her life back. I got a tremendous portion of all of that removed to now where I don't really have those problems other than just little flare-ups here and there. And I feel very confident about the future finally, once again. And I think that was the main reason why I reached out to you, is because there is so much that people could be going through, and it seems so hopeless out there. But there's always an answer for everything, including that stuff too.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that people can do is not give up. And it's understandable that you have days or moments when you're feeling low and you just don't have that oomph in you, but to keep finding those ways to pick yourself back up and keep trying, because there's so many answers out there and so much information and people recovering every day. But when you're in it, it can feel like this might never change. This is just it. And I don't think I can keep doing this every day for the rest of my life. And it's easy to lose sight of the potential for you. But yeah, it's hundreds of interviews now on this channel of people, whether they've been sick for months or decades. There's no one we're seeing now that is too sick, too far gone, too severe, to come back. And, just not giving up, I think, is such an important message. And your interview and interviews like this, I think, are one of the key things that help people to find that hope.
Yeah, well, you're making it all happen. And that's why I wanted to jump on here and offer whatever I could, because what people need more than anything is they need hope and they need a community. Because when you're isolated and you're alone in that sickness and the rest of the world doesn't understand it, it's a tough situation. And the world does discriminate. People want to go out, they want to work, they want to do stuff, but the world is not the nicest place sometimes.
Yeah. So you have support, you work with people now, you help people who are going through this. So tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I put up a website at No More. I don't even know. You put the link, but I won't say it online. You can put up the link. I don't want to advertise it, but I'm offering a free 15-minute consultation that I'll give to anybody. And I'll do my best in that consultation to give you everything that comes to me. I'll pray about it and I'll give you the best insight I can. And, that's a gift. I don't want to take your money, especially if you're struggling. But if you do want to work with me and you want to do, long-term something or short-term, then that's something we can talk about and negotiate. But the main thing is that I really have been blessed tremendously, especially in these last couple of years when it got the worst. And sometimes you just need one insight, and one insight can open up the Pandora's box. And I've seen those experiences happen. I've had several people throughout the years, and part of the journey I didn't discuss is that I went on to do mindset training from 2018 to 2021, and we had some great seminars, packed the room. I had some amazing people join me that are, very, very wonderful, powerful at what they do. And I've seen people make some tremendous transformations. Like you said, for Anita, she had fibromyalgia and, within a few hours, she was able to become pain-free, and she gives that testimonial. And it's not because I did it. It's just because really she just aligned with her faith and it made it happen. And there were so many more, but see, the common denominator is that people came together and they had a community. And that's the one thing. That community was the one thing people need. They need somebody in their corner.
At the very last interview I did, amazing guy named Nate, he said his turning point was when he realized he'd lacked a community his whole life, and then he found one and he started feeling better. It sounds too simple, and it's not what doctors are telling us, and it's certainly not the first thing that comes to mind when we get seriously unwell. It's like, oh, maybe I need to build a community around me. But I love that we talk about these things now. It's becoming more and more mainstream, not as much as it could be, but we're really starting to appreciate, how our bodies work, how all of this is connected, and how it all matters when it comes to our health. Yeah.
I think was it Dr. Elise Rankin, Mind Over Medicine? I think that was her big discovery, is that the number one determining factor whether somebody got well or not was the community. If they did not have a loving community, the chances were very low that they would recover. And if they did, chances are much higher.
Matthew, I know you also have a lot of free resources for people, which is incredible, because as you and I have talked about, you blow through so much money trying to figure this out, and it doesn't need to be that expensive. So what do you have for people for free to help them on their recovery journeys?
Well, sure. You can go to my website link below, but I have, in particular, there are some books that we put out, and my girlfriend, Sri, actually rewrote this book from the 1800s by F.L. Rawson, one of the gentlemen that I talked about earlier. He had this time, he was sent in by his government to go investigate the healing claims that were being made at this time when people were getting tremendous biblical-like healings. And he was sent there to denounce it and to prove that it was all just hogwash. But he ended up discovering that it was actually a very real thing, and it could be duplicated and replicated. And he started to use it. And he created what he called bulletproof soldiers. These guys would go on the battlefield, and this was a time when people were getting mowed down left and right. And when they would pray up in the right way this way, none of them were even scathed. And some of them even said the bullets disappeared. And we might be getting a little bit into the woo here, but this is a real documented thing that he wrote about. And his books sort of disappeared throughout the years, but in the public domain, she brought back one of them, and it's called Empowered by God. That book is free on our website. And there are other books too. So if you're open to that kind of information, it's definitely worth reading.
That is incredible. And of course, for people watching and listening, all of this is linked in the description. So I really encourage you just to take a moment and click through what's there. A lot of free stuff, a lot of great stuff. Matthew has clearly had a long and challenging journey with this. He gets it personally, and is a wealth of insight and information on this topic. So yeah, really great to put some more resources out there for people. Matthew, it's been so incredible meeting you. You have such a powerful story. Just listening to you speak gets me inspired, excited about the rest of my own life. You just have this way of lighting up potential and possibility, and reminding me of what's important in life. So I really appreciate you, and the way you support other people now. I'm just so glad that you've come through all that you've come through and are just doing so incredible. So thank you. Thank you for being here and for everything that you do to support other people.
Oh, thank you, Raelan. And thanks everybody for listening. And I'm just going to keep watching your channel, and I'm excited for this.
And for people watching, there is no shortage of hope and inspiration here. I'll link just a playlist of all the recovery stories that I've done. So you can just open it up and just give it a browse. I can guarantee there's something in there that's going to inspire you or help you through your challenging days, or maybe give you a spark of inspiration for your own recovery journey. So yeah, thank you again, Matthew. Thank you again to those watching and listening. And I hope to see you in one of these next recovery stories.